Okay, we're going to start with you, Ken, this morning. Tell us about your thoughts of the micro and macroeconomic view of the U.S. and any specific regions and what's happening in that space.
Okay, great. Well, I'm glad to say that there is some good news this morning. Certainly there's great news about Osama bin Laden, but thinking specifically... Specifically with construction news, the Census Bureau reported an hour ago that construction spending rose by 1.4% in March. However, that is hardly enough to make up for the 5-year-long slump that the industry has experienced. Normally, after having almost 2 years of economic recovery, as we've seen in the reports on gross domestic product for the past 7 quarters, and the 13 straight months of private sector employment gains, you'd expect to see construction coming back. But it's been held down by the huge drop in spending and in hiring and in overall economic activity that we are only just now recovering from. While GDP has moved into an expansion phase, we've made up only about a quarter of the job losses. And consumers have begun to spend again, but much more reluctantly than they had in the past, and they've switched some of that spending from brick and mortar stores to online. These have huge consequences for retail and office construction. Meanwhile, state budgets have also seen a big rise in tax receipts for the last 4 or 5 quarters, but they're still not back to pre-recession levels. And local governments and school districts, which depend so heavily on property taxes, are still seeing that tax base shrink. So across the board, there are still very serious challenges for construction. The one area that has done well has been federally funded construction, thanks to the stimulus legislation, the base realignment and closure process, and hurricane recovery and prevention work around New Orleans, as well as some additional appropriations passed in 2009 for highways and water and wastewater state revolving funds. Unfortunately, all of those programs are now at a maximum, and I expect to see federal spending drop off pretty sharply over the next year or so. In fact, here's the trend that construction has gone through in the last 5 years. It was way back in March of 2006 that construction spending peaked, and since then it has dropped by a cumulative 37%, including 7% just in the last 12 months. But when you break that into 3 categories, you really get 3 different stories. On the right side, the steep black line is private residential spending. In fact, it's so steep it probably should have a double diamond on it to warn skiers heading down. It bottomed out temporarily in the spring of 2009, came back up for a year when that homebuyer tax credit was in effect, but has been tailing off since then again. And in the March figures that came out this morning, both single-family and multifamily were down, although improvements took a jump up. So if you're serving that home remodeling market, the news looks better than on new construction. Going forward, though, I think market rate apartment construction will be one of the strongest categories through the rest of this year and next year. I think that the condo market and the government subsidized housing are going to be very weak, and I really don't have a prediction at this point about single-family housing. I've been fooled time and again. I thought it had to come back. I still think it does, but I'm not going to tell you what month. On the private non-residential construction, that's the blue line that was moving up well until 2008, hit a plateau, and then has dropped sharply now for almost 2.5 years. The March figures showed gains in almost every category, but I don't think that's going to be sustained. What I expect we'll see is strong performance in warehouse construction, in data centers, and probably in manufacturing. That looks to me like after a steep drop, it's about to come back. We may also see improvement in hospital construction and perhaps higher ed, but the office and retail markets are going to remain basically a story of doing new tenant improvements and new signage outside the retail spaces, not putting up new office buildings or shopping centers or big box stores for at least a year more and perhaps even longer than that. The red line shows public construction. That kept growing until 2009 when the state and local budget cutbacks really started hitting. Then these temporary boosts from stimulus and base realignment came in, but now in the last 12 months, the public has started, construction has started down, and I'm afraid that's going to continue for another year or even several years. Moving along to where the non-residential categories have done best in the last 12 months, we see highway and street up 11%, power up 5%, sewage and waste disposal up 1%. Of these, the power category, I think, has the most staying power. It's a combination of retrofitting the coal-fired plants to reduce emissions, building some new peak load natural gas capacity, and wind, solar, geothermal, other renewables, and then transmission lines, some of them hundreds of miles long and costing billions of dollars. Where is the economy producing these construction jobs? This map shows in green states that have added construction jobs from March 2010 to March 2011. The strongest have been in Texas, Tennessee, and Wyoming, up 5% or more. The states in pale green have gone up between a fraction of a percent and 4.9%. The states in light pink down 0 to 5, medium pink down 5 to 10%. At this point, only West Virginia has had a double-digit decline in construction employment. I expect this map will gradually get more green over the next year or two, but it's going to continue to be quite a rainbow because not every state is going to recover at the same time or with the same intensity. The other concern for construction, besides when and in what categories and where in the country is activity coming back, is materials costs. Here, the blue line that is tapering off and heading right up into the stratosphere is a producer price index for materials used for construction. That's been propelled higher by rising copper, steel, diesel, and just lately plastics costs. I think that for now, the run-up in steel and copper prices has ended. We'll see if the oil price run-up has also ended, and that will bring at least stability, if not a drop, to diesel and plastics prices. But contractors have a great challenge explaining to owners that the cost of materials is not just going up at the same rate as what they think of as inflation. The consumer price index, which you can see has been pretty moderate in spite of recent gasoline and food price increases. But even if an owner says, yes, I believe you, he's still going to say, so what? Your competitor is bidding to put up that office building for the same price as 2 years ago. That's what the flat green line at the bottom shows. So I think to sum up then, non-residential spending will have several growth categories over the rest of this year, even more next year, but they're going to be dragged down by the end of the federal spending boost and continued drops in school and other public spending at the state and local level. Residential will be helped by a big surge in apartment construction and later, sometime later, single-family construction coming back. So total construction spending this year should be up by between 3% and 7%. After 4 years of decline, that looks pretty good. Materials cost will continue to be a worry. I think by the end of the year, probably up 5 to 6%, but more volatility on either side of that. Labor costs, not a worry right now. Well, that's my story until I see new data. When I do, I'll put it in the Data Digest, which you're all welcome to subscribe to. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you, Ken.